welcome. I'm so excited you've tuned into the Sacred Gut Punch podcast, the place of authentic stories, real breakthroughs, endless possibilities. I'm Dr. Tomi White-Bryan, recording from Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm a coach and consultant in human and organizational performance and the creator of Emotional Intelligence 3.0, a system for achieving extraordinary performance. Welcome to our second episode. Jim Luck is our guest today. Jim is a delightful friend of mine. I first met his wife probably 16 or 17 years ago, and she brought Jim into my life, and I feel so blessed to be friends with both of these delightful people. Jim is a wine master. Actually, Jim, what is the designation you have in the wine world?
Well, inasmuch as I serve and pour wine, I'm a sommelier, but I am not certified through the Court of Sommeliers.
Okay.
I have designation with WSET, or the Wine Spirit Education Trust, outside of London. And I'm a level 2, which means I've mastered the intermediate level, which means, Tomi, I'm not a master of it at all. But I do love it, and I love learning and exploring it and sharing it with people and pouring it for others.
Well, now, Jim, remember, those of us who are masters of only opening the bottle and lifting the glass, you far exceed my capacity in that regard.
You're kind.
But thanks for being here today. And, what I want to know, Jim, is what is your story of the sacred gut punch?
Well, actually, as I was kind of thinking about this, Tomi, before I came on today, we could talk about multiple stories, actually. But I think the one that you and I have mostly talked about is the loss of my brother some 17 years ago by suicide. There were other moments, but that was the big paradigm shift in my life.
And what was it about? I mean, obviously the death of anyone you love is just rocks the world. I mean, I tell people, even, if you're like me, my father died from colon cancer, and we knew it was coming. And I say, you can be ready, but you were never prepared. And so when the rug is pulled out from you with a suicide, I my only experience with suicide is my former law partner took his own life. I did not have a sibling. And yeah, Jim, how did you survive that?
To some degree, I don't know.
You know,
Well, it's interesting. The first few months, the first, year, I don't know that I was conscious of making any changes at all. It was just sort of get through the day, take care of my boys. He left me with some legal matters I had to tend to. He left that onus on my shoulders, and I had to get that stuff done. But, short of that, I really wasn't aware of changes I was making. Now, 17, 18 years past, I can start looking back, and I can see that I started making some changes really, really early on that I don't know that I could have articulated when it was happening. So, for example, there were certain things of my brother's, his Philip, that I immediately started wearing. His watch, his Ray-Ban sunglasses, his leather jacket. And I think it serves multiple functions for me. I think on one hand, it was just keeping him close. I was donning him. I was literally wearing him. He was as physically close as I could get him to be.
so Jim, have you heard that country song, I Drive Your Truck?
I have not, I will confess.
Jim, my husband and I can't listen to it because we cry every time. It's based on this: a father's son is lost overseas in the war, and the dad drives his truck to be close to him.
Yeah. I was at the beach with the boys out in the surf on the Outer Banks, North Carolina, and a wave caught me I was unprepared for, and it knocked my sunglasses off my face. Notice I said my sunglasses, and I couldn't find them. And I was just there at the beach having a complete meltdown, at that moment, because that was just another aspect of him that I had lost. So yeah, that imagery of a father, driving a truck, that makes sense to me. I have had a bit of mourning every time I've lost something of my brother's or have had to get rid of it because it broke or it wore out or I couldn't get the watch repaired, that sort of thing. Yeah.
So, Jim, I already announced in the first episode I'm a crybaby. And so I'm getting emotional here listening to you. Did you feel like you lost him all over again every time you had to let go of a piece of him that you had through the watch or the glasses? I mean, did it rip the wound open all over again? Or did you get better each time at managing the grief that came with the loss?
Yeah. One of the best metaphors, I'm going to stay with the beach for a second, and it's just something that works for me. The idea of tides works for me, beach. One of the best metaphors I've heard for grieving is that when you first lose somebody, you've been knocked over by a wave.
Mm.
And by the time you get up, you're hit by the wave again and you go back down. And then you struggle up and you get hit by the wave. And as time goes by, it seems like there's a little bit more time before the next wave hits you. Now, when the next wave comes, it may still knock you over, but you increasingly get an opportunity to get a little bit more breath, a little bit more oxygen, a little bit more prepared before the next wave. So, yes, every time I lose glasses or I can't fix his watch, a wave would hit me. And there was increasingly more space between the waves. And increasingly, I was able to recover more quickly and stand more quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a beautiful metaphor. And, as you were talking, two things came up for me. My dad grew up in poverty. And so when he joined the military, if you won the boxing match, you got a ribeye steak. And to a young man born in poverty, a ribeye steak was a huge thing. And we joke that he went 27-0 just so he could get that ribeye steak dinner, right? And it started a lifelong love affair with ribeye steaks. But he said, I mean, he told us one of the reasons why he went 27-0 was his philosophy of get knocked down 7, get back up 8. And that's what you're talking about with those waves, right? That they just
Mhm.
keep coming and you just have to keep getting back up. And you and I are both deep admirers of human behavior. And at dinner, when we go to dinner, we have great conversations. We have a lot of similarities in our backgrounds and our education. And I wonder if there is a song, a mantra, a prayer, because you're a Renaissance man. You have many talents. One of them is you're also a reverend at a local church near where we live. And so I'm wondering if there's something that you regularly turn to or invite the people in your church to turn to when they're getting knocked down by those waves of grief.
There is. And it's not just by getting knocked down, it's also about how the process changes you. Because I'm not the same person I was before that journey of recovery started. And I don't think I should be. I mean, I'm still connected to that person, but I am different. If I can go back just for a second before I answer your question, and I'm going to answer it, you know, even that going back to the clothing or the glasses, there were actually aspects of my brother's personality I started trying on, like to see if it would fit. Like my family system no longer has my brother, and he had certain roles and rituals that he would do within the family system, and there was a vacancy there, and I started trying on some of those things that I liked about him. And, throughout this whole process, I also found out that there were some articles of clothing on me that I didn't even like, but they had been given to me and I wore them out of duty and loyalty. And his death actually allowed me to start getting rid of some of that clothing, borrowing some of his, and I didn't try to become him, but it freed me up to do a whole lot of different exploring. So now with that context, I'll go back to your question. There is a Jesuit priest, paleontologist that I just love. And I love the fact that a priest is also a paleontologist. And because he is, he doesn't think in terms of centuries. He thinks in terms of millennia. And I just love that. So this is a quote of his. It's a little lengthy, but I adore this. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet, it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually, so let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what this new spirit gradually forming within you will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that feels so contradictory to humans and our need to complete and check things off our list, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And when I first read these words, it was just like a hot day and just kind of going into a cold pool, or I mean, it just was refreshment. Like, this is what my soul has needed to hear for a long, long time.
Yeah, I love this, so there's this notion in transition of being able to stand in the unknown and the uncertain, and we're just really bad at that as I think as a species. We want the known. And what I'm curious about is, in the uncertainty and darkness after Philip's death, how did you make space for this new reality other than his sunglasses and his watch? And that's a very profound thing, but were there other things that you did to lessen the uncertainty?
I love the phrase making space. And I did some of this without intending to do some of this. Almost immediately, I had this visceral need to stop taking care of people. I had an interesting relationship with my brother. In many ways, I would kind of say that I functioned as the good father, and our dad functioned as the bad father. And so he would call me as the good father, though, if that's making sense. So in many ways, I took care of him and always kind of worried when he would call me because it meant something. He was in some sort of trouble, he needed me. But anyway, I had this visceral need to stop taking care of people after he died. I think all ministers have a type of messianic complex, not in the sense that we think we're perfect, because most of us don't, but in the sense that we think it is up to us to save. And then you can kind of fill in the blank with whatever you want. Save this soul, save this church, save this cause, save this nation, save this brother, whatever the case may be. And it manifests itself differently depending on your theology and politics, but it's there. And after his death, I was just like, oh, hell no. I don't want to save anybody or anything anymore. I'm done. I quit. I resign. I'm not doing it anymore. And I don't want to say that I got like mean or bitter, but certain nonsense in the church I just wouldn't tolerate any longer. So, like, there was somebody in the church and they wanted me to chase them rather than just come out and tell me what they were need. I was just like, I'm not chasing you. You can come to me and you can tell me what you need, and then together we can figure out how we can fill that need, and it may or may not involve me, but I'm not chasing anybody. So that space was being created just as I was kind of enforcing some boundaries that should have been enforced a long time before my brother died.
Wow, that's so, in emotional intelligence 3.0, we talk about helping is noble, right? But helping is also entangling,
Hmm.
right? Some of the research I've been doing on human performance shows that this dichotomy between engaging and entangling is very important to reach emotional wellness. We need to engage, not entangle. And when we take helping is noble to the extreme, right? That's when we
Absolutely.
got, right? And I love that you just woke up one day and said, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it was born out of grief. I mean, I couldn't take care of myself. How in the world was I going to take care of somebody else? But in that moment of taking care of self, I realized that I had been doing some things, some entangling that I should have untangled myself from a long, long time before.
So, Jim, I keep hearing my friend Evelyn's voice. Exhaustion is your best friend.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. There are certain things I would have never engaged in, except his death sent me to the bottom, and I was there, and I was forced to think about things and feel things only because I was there at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jim, I got to the same place you mentioned from reading a book my friend David Emerald Wommeldorf wrote about the empowerment dynamic, which is the opposite of the drama triangle: victim, persecutor, rescuer. And what you and I are talking about is the rescuer who loves to help, right? And I will never forget. And I don't know why. I'd been reading the book and I went home for lunch and I didn't even realize Jim was in the house, my husband. And I'm marching up the stairs and I'm yelling to no one in particular, I am done rescuing,
Hmm.
right? And I didn't realize that Jim was in the bathroom in the master bedroom. And I heard this little voice go, well, does that mean you're not going to help me anymore? And then I had to say to him, there's a difference between lovingly being of service to someone and entangling through helping.
Absolutely. One of the things that's kind of been interesting about my particular journey is that recently I've accepted a job at a higher end restaurant. And I may love wine, but I have no experience working in a restaurant whatsoever. But the universe gave me an opportunity, or at least showed me that the door was open. And I thought, why the hell not? I'm going to go through it and I'm going to see what happens. And what's been interesting, Tommy, is that I've started to, as I think about that job and that so-called secular context, in light of my ministry context, I've started reevaluating some things. And I really, like the idea more and more of hospitality. And when I say hospitality, I'm being more specific to mean I am creating space for. So when I'm functioning as a therapist, my job is not to do the work. My job is to create the space for the client to do the work. When I'm in a church, my job is not to do the holy for them or to be the holy person. My job is to create the space for them to engage the divine or to not engage the divine. And at the end of the day, it's really none of my business whether they do or don't. My business is to create the space. My business is to create the space for somebody to come in and have a nice meal and pour them a nice bottle of wine after a very long, exhausting day. But I'm not called to fill the space. I'm called to create the space. And I just think that helps with my entanglement issues to think in terms of hospitality and creating space.
Boy, that's beautiful and powerful. Thanks for sharing that. And one of the things I talk about in as a human performance consultant, I can build the platform, but I can't make you walk across it, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things we talk about is that making space, right? How do we make space for something new? And I love how you articulated that so clearly and wrapped it up in this beautiful word of hospitality, right? That's a great way of being of service without getting entangled, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, related to the word hospital, which has to do with healing.
Yep.
We just have some really odd understandings of healing, and we have some really odd understandings of caretaking.
Yes. Yes. And Dr. James Hollis is one of my favorite authors and Jungian psychologist, and he wrote this. He created this CD set called "Through the Dark Woods." It's like 6 hours. I think I listened to it 4 times. It was so good. And one of his books, he talks about an absence is a presence,
Mhm.
right? And the absence of your brother is just a huge presence. How have you stood in that absence while also allowing it to be a presence that might offer others some light or a way through a similar situation?
I think of a couple of things as far as what I might share with people. I could offer some cliches, and some cliches I even believe in. Like the cliche, life is difficult, and once you accept it, it becomes easier. I mean, I believe that.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing I've really learned in sort of critically looking back upon those years, some now 17 and a half years ago, is that my psyche, my soul, whatever language you want to use, the divine within me was already working toward my healing before I even recognized that it was. And in the years following those days, it was more of me catching up of what my self soul, the divine, was already doing within me and becoming aware of it, starting to become curious as to why. And then I started sort of bringing my actions and behavior in more congruence to what was already happening. But I would tell somebody, you are already doing what you need to heal and recover and to become a newer and healthier person. It may take a while to find it out, but I'm a pretty pessimistic person, but I have so much trust in what I just shared that it's already happening. I really do believe that. I don't know, Tommy, if that makes any sense or not.
Yeah. So Jim, what I heard is, some people say it this way: physician, heal thyself. The wisdom is already within. Take the time, allow the space, make the space for what's already happening inside, maybe to work its way all the way to the outside.
Yeah, and I don't, we don't need to get into Freudian psychoanalytic theory or, id's super ego and ego, but there was some part of me I was not conscious of that knew exactly what I needed. And I just had to be patient and to listen and to tune myself to that trustworthy voice. And that's just been a real gift that I've found out that, my brother gave me. I mean, he didn't intend to give me that gift, but he did give me that gift of learning to sort of trust myself and to listen to myself and that wisdom really is there. Education comes from that. I guess it's Latin educare, which it doesn't mean to put in information. It means to lead out that which is already there. And so this was very much a process of education.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, my friend Mel, who's also like you, counselor and minister in Richmond, Virginia, works with people who have to make some really hard choices. And what he's shared with me is sort of bookends. One is there's always a little bit of light in the dark. You just got to follow the light. Find the light and follow it. And the second thing he says, he was telling us about a client just railing at him about all the bad things that were going on in their life. And the client finally said, "And what am I supposed to do about all of these things?" And Mel said, "Rise," right? Like the phoenix, rise, right? Look for the light, rise.
One of the things, as far as my brother, he was so insightful into many of the, I'll use my language, sins of modern society. He was a sociologist, and he was so insightful into what was happening with racism and misogyny and in our culture. He could see it and he could articulate it really, really well. What my brother had trouble seeing was the light. My brother had trouble with a conjunction. It's not either or, it's both and. And my brother just, for whatever reason, couldn't find the and. He couldn't find the hope. And so much of suicide isn't about what happened in the past so much as it is a function of not believing in tomorrow, or not certainly not believing that tomorrow will be better. And so at the end of the day, it really was that sort of lack of hope and not being able to find the and that killed my brother. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that is so powerful. And Jim, how do you teach people? How do you invite people? How do you build the bridge, make the space for people in this deep grief to see the possibility of, and tomorrow will likely be better?
I don't know. Some of it I try to model as a minister who at least, once a week gets up and people listen to him for so-called wisdom. I try to model that when I'm grieving, I model that. I don't try to pretend it's not happening. I try to, it's real and it's taking a toll on me. And when one of my boys does something and it just so elates me, I share that too. I try to share both of those stories from my own life with people, if that makes.
Jim, 100%, right?
Yeah,
What you're doing is you're modeling the spectrum. You're teaching folks emotional literacy, highs and lows. It's not all in the middle, people.
not
It's
at all.
up and down, up and down, up and down. Thank you for being that role model for all the people in the world that you come in contact with, because without role models for emotional literacy, people can only do what they know. And if they can't see it, they can't know it.
Yeah,
So thank you for being
thank
that
you.
for the world.
Appreciate it.
Um, it's been a beautiful gift to me and now to our listeners for you to share in your experiences with us today. I want to express my gratitude to our sponsors who make this podcast possible, the EI 3.0 companies, Bryan Insights and Center for Emotional Wellbeing, and of course to my husband, attorney Jim Bryan. Thank you, Jim, for your endless support. I love you to the moon and back, Jimmy. Until next time, dear ones, may you use the difficulty as you rise with grace. If you're experiencing a sacred gut punch, remember, while you may feel alone, you are not alone. Help is out there. If you or someone you know is in crisis and considering suicide or self-harm, please seek support. Call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And if you're not in the United States, find a helpline in your country with Befrienders worldwide at befrienders.org. Your well-being is important to us.